So I'm Becky Unitt. I work for Accenture Digital, and specifically within Accenture Digital, Accenture Interactive. And my title there is Digital Strategy Senior Manager.
Okay, so could you tell us a little bit about that position and what that means for you on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, of course. So it's quite broad actually, and I think the title makes it sound like digital strategy is the only thing which we do in Accenture Interactive, and that isn't really the case. What we do is we help clients solve digital issues they are facing. And that could be something huge where they don't have a channel to engage with customers, for example. Or that could be on a much smaller scale that they want to tweak a particular channel that they're using so it's optimised. And really, we help clients across a whole spectrum, whether that's customer experience, marketing, commerce, or indeed content is the other area. So issues that clients face across those areas. And I guess it's issues, but it's also their vision. So it's not always, we don't always come in when there's a problem. We often come in as well when there's something to help them with because they have a very strong ambition. So yeah, it's helping clients achieve their ambition and overcome any issues that they face.
What's the story behind your employment at Accenture? How did you get to the position that you are at today?
So I'm a graduate hire for Accenture. I joined, it's 8 years ago this year actually. Really, I studied management at school. That was always one of my passions, I think. In terms of my A-levels, I had a brilliant teacher who was really inspiring for me. And then I went on to study management at Nottingham University. From there, obviously that opened so many opportunities, and really I spent a lot of time thinking, well, how is it that I would take my interest and obviously what I've learned forwards. And then the world of consulting seemed like quite a natural step for me. So chose consulting as an industry, looked across a lot of the big four and really found that Accenture was the best match for what I was looking for. And really, when I looked at why it was a good match, it was because the opportunity for a long-term career here was really something that stood out. And the people that I met along the way, so the recruitment process, people. So when you're going through the interview process, you meet hires of Accenture as well. So I then met, I guess, future colleagues and found again that they were the kind of person I'd want to work with. So yeah, it's going back some time now, but it's gone really quickly actually.
And you said consulting was always going to be a logical step for you after your degree in management.
Yes.
Why do you think that is? What do you like about consulting?
Yeah, so I really like the fact that I didn't want to narrow myself to a specific industry and a specific job title that meant I had to do the same thing day in, day out in the same place. And I then saw Accenture as a way of giving me a chance to work across many industries, and that's actually one of the great things about working here, but also across different types of skill. So as I said, whilst my title is digital strategy, the work I do has been so broad that it really has given me a brilliant grounding, and every day is quite fresh in that sense, and every year has been incredibly different to each year before.
So you like the fact that you can work with different clients because it gives you that differentiation that keeps you motivated. Yeah,
and I think when you're in college, it is quite hard to say what's the narrow industry that I want to be in, and that's where consulting is a really good natural next step, I think, because it gives you that breadth. So that's why.
So have you always worked in digital since you've been working with Accenture, or have you
yes
around?
So I joined actually more broadly in the technology group, which used to be where a large portion of the analysts, that's our junior sort of graduate hires, join. That's changed a little bit now, so there's lots of tracks that you can join. But from that group, I then realised that my passion was always about the customer. So the customer interaction, the customer experience, customer loyalty. And I looked around Accenture because it's a huge organisation, and I had to look around pretty early on to say, where in Accenture can I can I fulfil my interests? And then I found myself in a practice called CRM, Customer Relationship Management. And I say found myself, I had to do a bit of work to kind of get there on the journey. And then from there, CRM evolved again. So we evolved it into a number of different strands, but the strand I was in was then the marketing part, and that then joined with Accenture Interactive. So I've kind of moved career, I guess making that initial choice early on in my career was what set me on the path. And then the way that the firm has evolved is kind of what's driven me into each part that I've then moved into.
So CRM is hugely interesting to me, and I'm sure the students watching this will also be interested to hear exactly, what that is, and how perhaps technology impacts that and has changed how you interact with
Yes.
your clients.
Yeah, so typically we split CRM into marketing, sales and service. So those three segments. And I'd say across each of those segments, technology is an enabler that enables as each of those to happen. And if you look at marketing, for example, which is the area I specialise in now, if you look at the breadth of technology solutions available to clients, what we like to do is help them through the alliances that we have. So Accenture have some huge global alliances, and what we'll do is leverage them to bring them to clients. So the likes of Adobe, for example. Adobe is a huge and really successful marketing platform. That's one of our go-to approaches for clients, as well as platforms like SAP Hybris, etc. Some of those the students might be familiar with, some not so much. But I think for us it's always about understanding the requirements of the customer before we approach with a technology solution, because there isn't a one size fits all, and it is about saying, well, how will a technology enable what the client wants to achieve?
So how important would you say it is for students to be digitally literate in this day and age? They're graduating into an economy that's drastically different than it was 10 years ago. So how important is it for?
Oh God, yeah, I really think I think it's essential. I think digital is sort of omnipresent. It's actually in whatever the students of today, whatever career path they will take, digital will be a thread that runs through all of it. And I think as organisations like Accenture, we've adapted to say, well, we've created Accenture Digital to specifically serve clients with digital. So yeah, I think it's a key skill set, and I think it's something which really will be part of the future and the future workforce. And it changes not just the way that clients will be talking to customers, but the actual makeup of organisations themselves. So the way that the tools that are available for employees, the way which we can engage at work is changing, and that's all because of the digital revolution that we're in.
Excellent. And so backtracking a little bit, what is a typical day like for you? You can run that through.
Yeah, it's quite hard because, and I was reflecting on this before you asked the question. I think every day is quite different, and that's because the beauty of the work here is that you are working on a number of different pieces of work essentially, and potentially across different clients as well, especially at senior manager level. So, but I guess, is it helpful if I describe maybe what an analyst day would be like, or is mine?
You could just take more about do you work in the office? Do you work on client-based? How much interaction do you have with your clients? Just sort of, if a student was to take this position, in several years' time, what would they be expected to do?
Yes.
I do appreciate that it's different every day, and it's a hard question to ask.
That's
any insight you can provide as to what you're doing.
Okay, so a typical day for an analyst would involve travelling to the client site. Often that can be out of town, and that's essentially when you would then probably either have a temporary accommodation, or you would actually live from a hotel just for a couple of days a week to actually meet the clients. But clients are all over, so that can be really exciting, can be international, that could be just even in London as well. So there's lots of different locations. Analysts would find themselves on the client site for a couple of days a week, and then probably then coming back to the Accenture offices to work more closely with the Accenture team that are delivering that client engagement. So travelling is something I think which keeps it very fresh. And then also working directly with your client is obviously fantastic because you see a completely different office and a way of working. But then really important is coming back to the hub, and we've got offices across Manchester, Edinburgh, London, and in Ireland as well. And those hubs are really where, you know, we have specific areas where the teams that you're in Accenture would then meet. So yeah, both I think are really important, the client side and then the coming back to the office. And that really would be a typical week, bit of travel, bit of client, and then back into the offices.
Okay, great. And so you mentioned, you know, often you come back once working with the client to a team. So is it common to work on teams within consulting? You're generally part of a larger...
That's right, yeah. And I think obviously Accenture is huge, and the way that we like to operate though is through quite small knit teams to deliver a client problem, to solve a client problem. So a small team, it does vary. So you might find yourself on a huge client team, but generally our teams are quite lean. And you would find yourself working with other similar people, so similar analysts if you joined at analyst level, but then also that there would always be a support structure around you that would mean, you know, that you have a certain role to play within that team.
Okay. So you talked about, obviously, you know, you got a degree from Nottingham.
Yes.
In management. Did you do any other apprenticeships or work experience before joining Accenture?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I had the pleasure actually of did some work experience whilst I was at university, and then after I'd finished my degree, before I joined Accenture, I spent several months working with an HR and training consultancy that actually my uncle worked at, and he offered me the position there to work with them, and that was so important to get familiar with an office environment, to get familiar with just generally how the environment is in a working office, because of course it's different to what you'd experience day to day, it can be. So that was really useful, learnt lots of skills, and they did throw me in the deep end, and that was really important for me by the time I joined Accenture. And I still keep in contact with them now, because I really see that as an important part of the start of my career, really.
So how would you differentiate the experience that you got at university to the experience that you got within your work experience?
Yeah, so I think uni, I think the degree I did was certainly largely theoretical. So it was teaching the techniques and methods that I then needed to apply once I was in the world of work. So if I take an example, things like how to create a business case. How do you structure something financially to prove it will bring value? Learning that as a method, but then actually doing it in practice is very different, and that is a completely different skill actually, because you learn even more when you do something. So I think that was kind of the distinction for me.
Because there's a lot of more softer skills, I guess, that you learn when you work within the industry in terms of teamwork and communication and things that you can't necessarily get from the theory at university.
Exactly, yeah.
I definitely agree with you. How did you choose where you went to college?
Yeah, so I was quite rigorous with how I chose my university. Do you mean university or college?
You can do both. Okay. And university.
Yeah. So my college was my sixth form at school. I went to Gravesend Grammar School for girls, which again was a fantastic start before I then went to university. And I selected my university based on the league table rankings overall that are published online and in the newspaper. But then I also looked for the course I wanted to study. I then looked at where was that rated to make sure that I was getting I was choosing a good university. So it involved then, after that, some interesting visits up and down the country to different universities. And I really would recommend that's the best way of finding out if a campus and an environment is the right fit for you, because something on paper is just so different in practice. And I completely scratched out a few universities based on the fact that they just didn't feel right when I was actually there.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm.
So how did you feel when you first started working professionally? Did you feel prepared? I know you said that you learnt a lot and you were thrown in the deep end during your work experience placement, but when you started at Accenture, did you feel prepared and ready to
I think at first it feels like a really long day. I think when you think about your college day or a university day, you know, an office schedule is a long day. And I remember at the start just feeling quite knackered, but also because I needed to find that work-life balance and make sure that I wasn't exhausting myself too much at the weekends and the evenings. And you start to have a bit more of a priority focus on work and make sure that you can be there on time and get through the day. So I'd say that was an interesting learning, you know, just getting used to the length of the day. And yeah, just getting used to kind of, for me, it was living in London and travelling and all really exciting stuff that obviously, you know, your friends are going through as well. And your new colleagues are probably experiencing as well.
And I think you mentioned earlier you had a teacher that was very inspiring for you during A-levels.
Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit on
that
and what she did for you?
Yes, so she was my business studies teacher, and I found her incredibly helpful and knowledgeable, and she saw that I had a natural talent, I think, for the subject, and always made sure that, you know, she was putting me forward for extra opportunities. I think she put me forward for some additional exams so that I would become even more qualified and work harder. And yeah, she always brought it back to application in the real life. So it wasn't just teaching us from a textbook, it was always teaching us about how this works in practice, and I just found that really really inspiring, actually.
So you definitely bought into all of the sort of extra work that she was providing you with, and you did your own research and
exactly,
like
yeah.
Okay.
Put some extra hours in.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And it's definitely obviously played off.
Yeah.
A very successful career.
Yeah.
Let's see. Is there anything that, if you could go back, you would have done differently? Would you have studied something different at university, perhaps, or done more work experience, different apprenticeships?
I actually think I don't personally have any regrets, which is great. But I know that some people really wish that they had taken a break between all the hard work that they'd done at school before starting university is one, but then also after finishing university before they started in work, taking a 3, 6, 12 month year out, depending on what you can, I think is just really beneficial. I did travel before I started here, and I felt like the life skills I gained from doing that and just seeing a bit more of the world was actually quite beneficial. And I also think once you're on a kind of treadmill of your career, treadmill is probably not quite the right word to describe it, when you're on the trajectory of your career, you don't have the chance to take huge chunks of time out and see the world. So I really think that's what I would advocate doing, while you still can.
So what advice would you give students that are looking to get into and learn more about consulting and professional services or digital, any of the sort of specialisms that you focus in?
So I think there's a few things that I would recommend. The first is getting really familiar with where the industry is at, whether that's digital, retail, consulting. So following online, there's a number of blogs, and I think we are lucky in this age that the internet is just such a wealth of information. But I think there's some brilliant publications you can get familiar with in terms of the industry. But then also I do think getting the hands-on work experience where you can is really beneficial. And I would also say work experience doesn't need to be in the industry or consulting. Work experience could quite easily be in an unrelated retail job or hospitality, because again, the skills you're learning about seeing different businesses in action are incredibly helpful. So I think having the knowledge, equipping yourself with the industry, state of the industry and the latest trends and innovations is really key. But then also making sure you do get some hands-on experience be my two things.
And I know you mentioned different publications and blogs. Would you be able to share some of those perhaps with the students, things that you follow perhaps to keep yourself updated?
Yeah, so there's one, I mean, there's quite a few. So Marketing Weekly is brilliant. I'd say kind of bite-sized chunks of the latest advertising campaigns that have been really successful. You know, for example, the Christmas Burberry adverts that increased ROI and sales hugely. What was behind that? What was the story to why that marketing campaign became successful? Marketing Weekly is brilliant source of information like that. And I actually have bulletins so that I get updates on a regular basis from Marketing Weekly. I'd probably say that was the main one for the time being.
And what has been your most successful achievement so far? I'm sure there's been a few, but anything that you could sort of think of that comes to mind?
Yeah, I'm just
take
trying
a couple
to think.
seconds. Or you can come back to that if you want.
No, I can.
Okay.
I'm just I guess there's a few. Just thinking.
You can say a couple if you have a couple.
Yeah. I'll try and distill them.
We'll see which one's more interesting when we click.
Fine, yeah, no, you could do that as well. You could do that. So my most successful achievements, if I look at the different stages of my career, the most successful achievements are quite different across them. And if I even rewind back 8 years when I'd first joined, the most successful achievement that I had then was helping the employment, so a government agency, to update their call centre scripts for people applying for benefits. And really, I was helping them do the functional design for those scripts. And for me, just getting those signed off and knowing that they were then being used in the real world by call centre agents was, for me, just a really amazing feeling to think you've actually made a difference, you've made a tangible change to the way something's running. So that would have been my first realisation. And you're helping people's lives because it was about employment allowance and benefit. So I felt like we'd helped the broader, social good. If I then fast forward just a little bit, I think one of the biggest achievements came out of a challenge that, a really difficult project that was actually with a pharmaceutical client. And one of the things we helped them do was set up their contact centre for how customers would liaise to find out information about new products and new drugs that were on the market. And again, that was then an additional layer of complexity, a bigger team that we worked amongst. But again, when that launched, there was a feeling there that, we've helped patients have access to a new drug, and that again would change their lives. So for me, it was always about the end person that was impacted by the changes that we were making. So I'd say, those two, probably they're quite early on in my career, but I think they're quite relatable.
So you would say that meaning and enjoyment and job satisfaction for you comes with really making a difference in people's lives?
Absolutely. And that's actually the Accenture mantra, is improving the way the world works and lives. So yes, we're a commercial entity, but I think the value really comes from when you are helping people's lives. And Accenture Interactive, with Chaotic Moon, that's our development design agency, we just won a number of awards for designing a wheelchair fitness tracking app. So you think of MyFitnessPal that we would use, but actually on a wheelchair they found it was really hard for people to track how far have I travelled today, how many calories have I burnt, am I keeping fit, what's the distance and stairs and etc. that I've travelled. And or flights, I should say, and we actually won an award for enabling that and helping people in their lives, because that again was something they couldn't do before. that added value to the way they lived. So yeah, that really for me is what makes a difference.
Well, that's hugely meaningful, because I think often as an able-bodied person you don't think about perhaps the struggles that less able-bodied people have to go through.
Yeah, exactly.
And especially me as an athlete, as sort of you take things for granted, and I think if you can create something, I'm sure that has a lot of meaning in a lot of people's lives.
Definitely.
Okay, I think we've covered quite a lot of this. Okay, good one. What are some of the biggest challenges at your job? What are some of the things? I mean, challenges also lead to opportunities, but what would you say are some of the challenges?
So I think sometimes the challenge is there isn't always an obvious answer to a problem, and you have to approach client issues with a very creative mindset. So there is never a blueprint that we're following, that we just roll out at each client, and each situation is very different. And I think what that means is, the opportunity it means is, as an individual, you have to be quite adaptable and quite flexible and able to think on your feet to solve issues. So it's a challenge. No two clients are the same, but then with it you can learn and I think develop a bit more as a person. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge, and that's true across all consulting jobs really. The variation of what you're trying to solve.
And I think that equally makes it exciting for you, that being able to bring different creative solutions to different problems.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. What is the work culture like at Accenture, or what is it like to work here as one of the top 4 consulting?
Yeah. So we have 5 core values. As I say, the overall mantra is improving the way the world works and lives, but people are really at the heart of what we do, and we believe in order to work successfully and operate successfully, it is about the people that you work with. But we also believe it's about innovation, and we call it innovating in the new. So what that means, if you work for a company like Accenture, is you'll always have access to some of the latest innovations that are going on in the world. And we have a global network of innovation centres where we have amazing artificial reality or augmented reality demos, and we're also starting to look at how the use of robots and automation can be moved into life as well. So I think through working with a consulting company, you can really get access to the latest innovation and trends, and you feel like you're at the front foot of really what's changing in the world of business.
Wow, that's very interesting. I'm fascinated by augmented reality and where that's going to go in 5 or 10 years, and robotics. Yes. And self-driving cars. There's so much going on at the moment with drones, and it'll be interesting to see how it moves into business and how it can actually impact people's lives.
Definitely.
And any last question, any final advice for our career college students? Anything that you did that was vital for your career, or decisions that you made? Perhaps? Yeah,
I would say I'd say that it's okay not to know now what you want to do for the rest of your career. And I would also say that careers these days are sometimes a lot shorter than they were. So don't be paralysed by the amount of choice that's out there. I would say making a start at something and giving something a try is a really successful way of getting started. Not being afraid to get your hands dirty and try something new. So yeah, I would say don't be paralysed. But equally, I would say don't underestimate how important this phase of your life is. So your A-levels, your degree, any certification that you're going for is so important at setting you up for then what you want to do in later life. And if you miss the opportunities now, it can block doors in the future. So I'd say, yeah, really do focus on where you are now, because it does have an impact on where you want to get to.
Excellent. That was a very good answer.